Hi everyone, Platon Davidou here. I am a violinist, composer, author, and today I will share with you my experience using Larsen Soloist strings. This is a two-part video. The first part shows step by step how I replace the strings, and in the second part I will voice my thoughts and what you need to know before buying these strings. While watching the first part, you may have a question: why didn't he remove all the strings at once? Why does he remove one and then put a new one in its place? And the same thing happens with all the other strings. The answer is in the second part of this video. So, on to the strings. The first, the strings have a great sound. It is dense, thick, and really focused. In my opinion, the violin has quite richer in timbre, without doubt. After all, the composition of the strings, its synthetic, is also different compared to the Chromcor, still, from Pirastro, which I have been using for the last few years. By the way, one of my famous tracks in which Chromcor strings from Pirastro sound is Dramatic Sad Violin and Sadness. You may have heard these tracks on social networks and you can compare it with the current sound. Links to these tracks are in the description. The second is Larsen strings need shrinkage for a very long time. Before each exercise, even several times a day, they had to be constantly pulled up. The difference, for example, is colossal when compared to the Chromcor from Pirastro, since Chromcor's strings was retracted in just 3-4 days of intensive training. Larsen strings have a very long shrinkage. Very long, in my case, it is more than 2 weeks. During this period, I had 3 performances on stage and many rehearsals, and these strings lost their tuning literally every 10-15 minutes. If I knew I wouldn't change the strings in front of the stage, the strings need to be played very intensely, especially if your performance is at hand. They need at least 2 weeks of shrinkage in my case, and I would be infinitely grateful to those who would tell me about it in advance. In my experience, I would recommend that you choose a more routine time slot in which you can freely and without panic give time to these strings. If you work in a studio, it will not be a problem for you. Third is Larsen strings have a rather deep tuning stroke. As you can see, I have 4 fine tuners on a tailpiece, and when I was on Chromcor strings, I almost never used pegs. I had enough fine tuners in 99%. Now, when I have Larsen, tuning stroke of the fine tuners is not enough. Almost every time you have to adjust the strings with pegs, and I didn't expect to have to get used to it. On the other hand, this is a cool feature of these wonderful synthetic strings. But why? I once heard that fine tuners reduce the potential of the violin to some extent. That is why it is most often seen that fine tuners is only on the E string or A, and other strings are without the fine tuners. Thanks to Larsen strings, synthetic strings, tuning strings with pegs becomes comfortable and more accurate, because the range of turnover of the peg is quite wide, and this is a plus for tuning. Although it can take longer compared to the using fine tuners. I would appreciate a comment on this. Brief conclusion. You may not find perfect strings. After all, every manufacturer is always looking for a compromise between convenience, quality and price. But maybe the strings don't get perfect when they can't do anything, but when they solve your problem. Well, I wish everyone to find your perfect strings. Answer: why does he remove one string and then pull a new one in its place instead of removing all the strings at once. Bridge. Bridge. Often, when I removed all 4 strings on the violin, the bridge simply fell on the violin top, and then it had to be placed again. But after I placed it, it would seem in the same place. The sound became a little different. The fact is that when we talk about acoustics, wooden elements, the fate of some resonating details to others, even atmospheric pressure can affect the sound. That is, even in a different weather, the instrument can sound with a barely noticeable difference. I would appreciate your comment whether you have heard such facts, or are they fairy tales? And every time I changed the strings and placed the bridge from scratch, after that there was a period of getting used not only to the sound of new strings, but also to the fact that the bridge sat down a little in a new way. The violin seemed to change a little timbrally, barely. This is noticeable because when you are a professional practicing musician, the instrument becomes an extension of you, and barely noticeable changes can be felt immediately. I thought maybe it's such an effect at the level of the self-persuasion, like some kind of placebo, and it's really just the sound of the new strings, and it really has a different sound. But I remember the experience when it was necessary to remove the strings and then put them back, same strings. The sound became a little different after that. The strings were not replaced that time. So, in this video, I decided to move the bridge as little as possible. And it seems to me that it gave results. I hope this video was useful for you. I'm grateful to everyone for feedback. Press subscribe for more. Stay tuned and take care.